back to Michael Bear and Sean Ryan, candidate for at-large council.
Thank you, Deirdre. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the process of interviewing as many at-large candidates as possible, and we're really glad that folks can come by. We sent out notices to every possible potential at-large candidate, and some that were obviously incumbents or whatever, but we invited everybody. Some of them got back to us, some of them didn't. If they don't show up, that's because they didn't care to. But I do appreciate those that came. It's an effort to get you information out about the potential leadership of this city, which is very, very important. It's very important nowadays, especially. And I just want to give kudos to anybody new that's running. It's not easy. Citywide is big. I mean, you have to work as hard as if you're running for mayor to run for citywide city council. You have to be in every corner of the city. And it's quite a feat, and I've done it with friends, and it's not an easy task. It'll hurt the best of us if we let it get to us. But I just want to congratulate those that have been on, and I want to welcome another one of those candidates, Sean Ryan from Jamaica Plain. Sean, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
First off, and this is my standard question list. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are attempting this lunatic task of running for citywide council. Not that it's not a noble position, but I know what it takes to go for that position.
Well, I'm very concerned about our country right now. I've come to politics by way of an interest in the national scene, the political scene, and also by way of my interest in economics. I pay really close attention to what's happening down in Washington and on Wall Street, and I basically I think things are going in the wrong direction. I'm trying to get involved at a young age, and I'm trying to start local, and I'm trying to spread a different message than one that most Americans are hearing these days. I think that we're coming to rely a little bit too much on the government. I think that we need to start thinking in terms of self-reliance a bit more. And in terms of city government, it's clear that our city at least has to be more independent. We can't really afford to depend on the state government for aid, because clearly the state of Massachusetts can't balance its own budget. Yeah. And the state in turn can't really afford to depend on the federal government, because at this time, sure, they are printing money and trying to stimulate the economy and dispersing that money to the states, but it's gonna end. We're not gonna be able to keep borrowing from China indefinitely, and eventually we're gonna have to all tighten our belts. It's a serious situation that we're in. I don't want to, I mean, it's a rainy day outside, so I don't want to bring the rain in here too. But I think we do have to face up to what our nation is looking at right now.
It's a unique outlook. I appreciate that. What do you think you bring to the table that the other 22 or whoever may qualify? And I'll tell you, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's been years where there were 35 at-large councils running, and I think just the exercise of getting people out and getting people out to vote and the activity is tremendous for society, for democracy, and that's what we need. We too often have enough, where people stay in office for far too long. We have too much of that, and fresh faces. You need fresh faces constantly. I think things have to turn over, and I think it's natural that it turns over to a younger generation in most cases. But what do you think that you bring to the table that's unique from some of the other candidates?
Well, there are 15 candidates, and before I say what distinguishes myself, I have to say I am very happy to have a large field.
15, I had to send out 22 certified letters.
Well, we didn't all gather the requisite number of signatures. Okay. But I mean, I basically think of politics as a democracy, a free market of ideas. So the more ideas that are there, the better. The more people from which we have to choose, the better. And I think I actually do stand out from the field. We had a candidates forum last night, and that was the first question. In this large field, what makes you different? I am the youngest candidate. I'm from Boston originally. Not all the candidates are. Most of them are. I did spend 14 years in the Boston Public Schools. which a few of the other candidates are from the Boston Public Schools. But my parents had a good deal of faith in the ability of the Boston Public Schools to educate me at a time when many other parents did not. So I had a very interesting experience in the Boston Public Schools because essentially I learned what it was like to be a minority. Before I got to Boston Latin, I was always a minority. And in fact, when I got to Boston Latin, that was when I sort of learned that not all white people were just like me, because the only white people I had really known were the ones from my neighborhood, my friends. I lucked out in the fact that I almost had a neighborhood school experience within the schools because my parents and my friends' parents were able to keep us together in a class almost throughout the entire experience. But what I bring particularly to this race that's different more than anything else is that I have a completely different philosophy of politics. I really do believe that government should be minimal, and I think especially government should be local. To the greatest extent possible, we need to be giving the individual as much freedom to choose their own destiny as possible. So where there are collective efforts required, I feel like the best level of government to make those decisions is the local. And a good example of that would be schools. Because if you just look at the history of government-sponsored and government-administered schools, we've seen this movement of the decision-making power going up. Yeah. To the state level and to the federal level with No Child Left Behind. And I just really don't agree that uniform standards or control of education from Washington makes any sense. I feel like the closer that you can get to the individual who's actually consuming the service, i.e. the parents of the child, the closest that we can get to the decision-making, to being in their hands, the best. And for that reason, I support a return to neighborhood schools.
We're spending 50% of the school budget trying to stay with a mistake that the government put on us many years ago. I know many people from both sides of the fence that would agree that busing never worked. There is some necessary, maybe special needs kids, so on and so forth, but riding empty school buses that I see riding around, spending $60, $70 million a year, that could be fixing schools is a crime to me, and I appreciate that point of view.
Well, I mean, I'm too young to remember any of the strife that went down in the 70s when they instituted busing, and I find that the sort of rhetoric that was employed on both sides, the strife that was created, I don't condone any of that, and I certainly don't condone the sort of violence or the sort of rhetoric of hate. But I really just don't believe in the use of force to solve social problems. And regardless of whether you think the busing was necessary or not, or well-intended or not, it was an example of the government trying to force a new way of living on people.
Yeah, my point exactly.
And I feel like it just exacerbates problems. It just, it creates enmity and just furthers problems that I think eventually start to solve themselves if you take an approach to give people the power